Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Yud Tes. Yesterday was Yud Ches, and we left off Yud Zayin on the base. So, all right, we got some work head out for us. So let's see what's going on. So we got to the Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Chaliyos Acher HaShabbos. If Yontif, good morning, Eddie. We just started Mishnah on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Chaliyos Acher HaShabbos. If Yontif fell out on Sunday after Shabbos, Beishami, everything, i.e., whatever clothes he has or utensils or himself, needs to go to the mikvah before Shabbos. Kalim Fnei Shabbos, that the Kalim Fnei Shabbos. However, but a person can go on Shabbos, he can be misakein himself, b'shavim, and they both agree, both Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. That one is allowed to do hashaka. Hashaka is you have water that's tameh, right? Right, and you have to basically it touches. All you need to do is for it to quote unquote hashaka, like kiss other water, has to make contact with the other water, and then automatically that water, it's like it was all went into the mikvah. It's all tahor. So it's called hashaka. It just has to make contact. The two bodies of water need to make contact. So if it's in a stone utensil and you do hashaka, then it's metahir all the bad water. You can go ahead and dip it in another kli. The Gemara will explain the case. You can go ahead and put, let's say a wooden kli it's already tameh, and dip that in order to be metahir both. You can't do that. Umadvilin megav lagav, and you can be taivel from gav to gav, right? From one reason to another. Umechabura lechabura, and also for to go from one chabura to another chabura, which will be also regarding by the current Pesach. One is allowed to go ahead and do that, and the Gemara will be mafarish tama. Erev Yontif is Shabbos. Yeah, right. Erev Yontif Shechal Shabbos. Correct. Yes. Fine. So Zok the Gemara. So Tekuli Alamiyaz B'Kli Shabbos Lo. So nevertheless, everyone holds that you can't take the Kli on Shabbos, right? We said the Kalim do from Erev Shabbos. I assume it's Katzenstein's, right? Yeah. All right. Oh, Zigo. Good morning. All right. So the Gemara says the Kuli Alma. So he says do the Kalim before Shabbos. We just started Yud Zayin and Beis at the bottom. Kli b'Shabbos lo. You don't do the Kli on Shabbos. My time. So now we're gonna have a bunch of reasons. So Amar Rabba says Rabba Gzeira Shemi Yitlan b'Yadav Yiravi Arba Amos b'Shus Rabba. What's going to happen if we allow him to go ahead and dip his kalim? A person might go ahead and carry to the local mikvah. Carries to the local mikvah. There is no eruv. He'll carry the dalat amos. Therefore, we don't want you carrying your kalim to the mikvah. Well, okay, let's say he has a bore in his chatzir, right? Top of your chesed aleph. Let's say he has a bore in his chatzir. Why was he going? Probably because karbanos. His karbanos that he had to bring for his regel. Right. So it could be his clothing. Right. Right. It could be his clothing for his karbanos. Right. So it could be his. Well, we'll soon see both. There's clothing and there's also utensils. So, but there is more taharas that are applicable to Yontif because we'll see in the next mission in terms of the Olasriya, the Shlamach Chagiga. Fine. So, okay, but what about if he's not going to carry if he has a boar in his backyard? No, so it's a gzeira in that case. The gzeira in that case, even though if he has one in his backyard, it's still no good because if he doesn't have one in his backyard, he'll carry it in Dalad Amos. So Yitinach Shabbos. Okay, this makes sense on Shabbos. B'Yontif Ma'ik L'Meim. Where you say about Yontif? Maybe Yontif he should be able to be Taivel as Kalim. So Gzeira Yontif Atu Shabbos. So we say no, he shouldn't do it on Yontif because he might come to do it on Shabbos. Omiga Zrina. And do we make such a Gzeira on another Gzeira? So now we're going to ask multiple questions about making a Gzeira on a Gzeira, right? And then we're actually going to have another Teretz on the Mishnah. And the Gemara will say, we're going to ask these four questions again, and then the same answer. So now the Gemara says, and who says we make a Gzeira? But tonight we go to the Mishnah. The Shavan Shemashi can as a mayim the kli f and the tara of a They both agree that you can do hashaka with the water. You can connect the two waters in a stone utensil, right? But you don't dip it. And if we hold that we should make a gzeira from one case to another, so why shouldn't hashaka maybe be usher? Because we say you can't dip it. So it says I bro. Does this make sense to make a gzeira in the gzeira in such a case, right? Right? If he has other water, right? If he has water that's good, so why is he doing hashaka? Why is he bothering to go ahead and be mitayr his water? El de Leslie, right? He doesn't have a kev de Leslie means there's zahirbu, and since he doesn't have other waters that are tahor, therefore he's going to be very careful, and therefore will allow him in this case to go ahead and do hashaka. So there's no reason to make a gzeir in such a case. So Ace Fast and bidli tame. So he says you can go ahead and draw water in a bucket that is tame. Vutar and it becomes tor when you draw the water, and also the bucket itself is becoming tor. The Isa, and if you're not allowed to go ahead and put kalim in, right? If you can't put kalim into a mikvah on yontif, right? The Isa nigzar dilma also maybe he's just going to go ahead and without even needing to draw water, he'll just go ahead and he'll be tayvel his buckets. The Gemara says no. Shani Yasem mitoch shelo huchelo ella al yidei dalia. Zachor, since the only way he's allowed to go ahead and be tayvel is through basically drawing water, so therefore he'll remember that since he's drawing water, that he's not going to go ahead and do it without drawing water. So eisvei kli shenitma be'erev yantif. If a kli becomes tamei and yantif, you can't go ahead and be. Sorry. So if it. Right, if it came tamei and erev yantif, you can't, if you can't push it off and do it on yantif tomorrow. But yantif, however, if it became tamei and yantif, also be yantif, then we are tevel and yantif. Now now if it's we should make a gzeira to nigzer the yantif, also there of yantif. We should say even if it became tamei and yantif, you should not be allowed to go ahead and take it to the mikvah. Why? Because you might go ahead and take it to the mikvah also from erev yantif. The Gemara says no. Tuma b'yantif milsa lo shchichu. Tuma and yantif is not as common because people are very careful when it comes to yantif because all the karbonos, and therefore it's considered to be something which is not common. Milsa lo shchichu lo gezer banan. Something which is not common, then the runner we're not gezer. So Eisvei, another question. So kli shenit b'avatuma ein matzinos b'yantif. If a kli became tamei from an avatuma, came into contact, let's say, with avatuma from the direct source, ein matzinos b'yantif. Right, then you can't go ahead and be tayvel on yantif. Bevlada tuma, but if it came in contact with somebody who came in contact with the avatuma, right, then matzinos b'yantif. Then we should be then you can't be tayvel on yantif. Right, and no, it's basically kind of contact. It was like a sheni. And if we make a gzeira for a gzeira, so why don't we say that you can't be tayvel something which came in contact with a with something which is with a rishon, right, or with a vladatuma, right, because you might come to be tayvel something that came in contact with a avatuma. So it says vladatuma heikim ishkachasla. So what case is vladatuma? If something came in contact with vladatuma, I want to be tayvel. So what's the reason why I want to do it? Right, there's different levels of tuma. Right, so that wouldn't be mitame something like chulin, right? That would be mitame something like truma, right? Which would get affected if it comes in contact with something that is made contact with a velada tuma. So that's a be by kohanim, and kohanim is him, and kohanim are normally careful. So therefore, since it's really only applies to the kohanim because they'd be the ones to go ahead and be toivel. So therefore, we say there is no need for exam in this case because it's only really applicable to. It's not applicable to the hamonam. It's only applicable to the kohanim because they're the ones who are eating truma, and therefore they'll be careful only to do it if it comes in contact with a vladatuma and not an avatuma. So tashma damarav chibarav amarav nidosh ein lo begadim. So ma'aremes v'tovas b'begadeha. If a nida does not have any other clothing that are tahor, she can go ahead and basically be tovel, right, with her clothes on, with her begadim, and therefore she and her clothes will become tahor. And if we're making gzera, let's say she can't do that, right? This form of harama. Why? Because she might just go ahead and put her clothes in, right, without without her herself going in it. So Gemara says, no, Shani Hasam mitoch shelahutra la ella aydema. Right? Since the only way for her to remember, right, to do it is by wearing it in the mikvah, so therefore she's going to realize, right, and therefore she will be, careful not to go ahead and do it directly, but she'll do it in this manner. Fine. So that was the first teretz on our Mishnah as to why one is not able to go ahead and be toivel on Shabbos, because one might come to carry, and then we asked all these questions. I make gzera. This other case, you don't make gzera, and each one of these objects we say, or each one of these cases we say is a reason not to make a gzera and a gzera.
We don't make gzera that the person can't total themselves. We're only talking
the kalim, and the kalim, right? And Rav Yosef Amar gzera mishum schita. The reason is because it's chita. If you're toivel clothing, right, a person might come to squeeze them out. Person might come to squeeze them out. So therefore, he'll violate Shabbos that way. So the Gemara says, "Amar le'abaye tinach kelen de bnei schita ninu kelen de bnei schita ninu ma'ik le'memer." Okay, that's, let's say, clothing that you wear. But what about utensils, right? Hard objects. There's no schita there. There's no squeezing out there. So Amar le'abaye gzeiru hani atuhan. It's a gzeira because of right. One might come to squeeze. So therefore, we don't want you to do any kalim, even your forks and knives. And eisve kohani tiyufta. So the Gemara says, you don't make a gzera to a gzera, right? You make a gzera to a gzera. So what are all these cases that we just asked before? And v'shanale kedashinina. We gave the same teretz, whether it was milsa lo shchiach, or it was something that was zachor, or only shaykh to the kohanim, right? So fine. And Rav Bibi Amar gzera shema yisha. If we allow a person to go ahead and be toivel on Yantif, then when he has the ability to do on Erev Yantif, he says, might just push it off and says, I'll just do it tomorrow. So therefore, we don't want him to do it. And Tiny closely to Rav Bibi, Kli Shanita Be'Erev Yantif, Ein Madino Sabi Yantif, Gzera Shema Yisha. Right? At Kli came to me, and Erev Yantif, you can't go ahead and do it on Yantif because he might delay and push it off, and therefore he'll come to do it Erev Yantif instead of doing it on Yantif. And Rav Amar Mipnei Shanira Kimisakin Kli. If he's going ahead and be toivel a mikvah, to be toivel a kli into a mikvah on Yantif, it looks like he's doing misakin kli. So ihachi adam nami. If that's the case, a person should also be forbidden. He's misakin himself. So adam nira kimaker, right? A person looks like he's just going for a dip. He's going to cool down. So itinach ma'im yafim ma'im roi ma'iklememers. Okay, that's good with nice fresh water. But let's say there's water that's sort of disgusting, whether it's used for soaking flax or dirty water, huh? The canal, right? He goes in there. He's not being misakin in there, right? So I'm not, and therefore he's not going to, for the nice, for the nice chill, right? He's obviously going for a mikvah, right? Right? A person comes, and when it's very hot out, as Rashi says, right? And and he goes ahead and he even dips himself in stinky water because that's being better than being, too hot. So okay, this makes sense. Maybe in the summer, okay, but in the winter, he's going in there. Obviously, he's going to be masaking himself. He's like being masaking kli. So he comes in, he's all dirty and muddy, and even though he's going to go in, it'll be cold and it's smelly. Nevertheless, he's dirty. He has to wash off all this mud and stuff from him, and therefore that's the reason why he goes in. So tinach the Shabbos. So okay. This makes sense on Shabbos. What about Yom Kippur, right? What on Yom Kippur? Obviously, he's not going for any other reason on Yom Kippur, right? Besides to remove the tumah, right? And let's say a person is a zav or whatever it is, and a person needs to go to the mikvah, so he goes, he will soon see even on Yom Kippur. So what on that case? So Amar Rava says, Mi'ika midid Shabbos shari of Yom Kippur Aser. Is there something that on Shabbos is mutter? Now, as we said, Shabbos, a person can go to the mikvah, but Yom Kippur, because it's going to look like Masake Adam, right? He can't, right? Ella, Hoel Shabbos Shari, Yom Kippurim Nami Shari. Rather, Hoel, since, right? We're going to ask him this concept now, right? Either Hoel, since Shabbos is mutter, right? And Yom Kippur is usually less than Shabbos, Yom Kippur is also mutter. Now, the Gemara says, Does Rava hold this concept of hoil, of sins? But now we learn in the Mishnah, hachayshesh b'shinov, one who's his teeth hurt. So normally, one's teeth hurt, can't really take medication on Shabbos. So lo yigama b'henes achaymetz. Right, I guess he used to go ahead and treat it with some sort of vinegar, right? I don't know if they still use it. Perhaps our dentist can inform us whether or not for his tooth pains, right? So they take vinegar. I guess it would help it to alleviate some of the pain. So you can't go ahead and drink or sip the vinegar. But you can go ahead and, let's say, dip your food in the vinegar and get it that way. And if he heals, he heals. In other words, so you can't go ahead and basically sip on the vinegar, okay? But because that looks like you're doing refuah, but you can go ahead and eat. You can dip your bread or whatever you can eat in your vinegar and eat it. And if it becomes healed that way, it becomes healed. Allah, we asked a question on that. We have a price that says, a person should not go ahead and sip the vinegar and spit it out because that looks like refuah, but he can go ahead and sip it and swallow it. And swallow the vinegar. So
stomach problem.
Right. Huh? Yeah, they don't have stomach problem. Right. Yeah, the stomach.
So he can't gargle, become involved, but he could sip it
and swallow. But the first one says he can't sip it at all. So what's going on here? So Abaye gives the easy tear. The easy tear says, no, that which the Mishnah says you can't sip it means you can't sip it and spit it. Right, so now it makes sense. It stems. They both agree. And Rava, who's the one we're about to ask, on this concept of hoil, does he hold this concept? Rava Amar, even if that the Mishnah says when he says you can't go ahead and sip it, it means you can't sip it and swallow it. One is before the meal. Before his meal, people used to have vinegar, right? So if it's before the meal, then it doesn't look like you're doing anything abnormal. So that was the case where you say you can sip it and swallow it. Yeah.
Put bread afterwards and it soaks it.
Right. So I guess one of the ways. But
start to swoosh it and you put bread.
Yeah. But over here, so the other one is after. If it's not before a meal and he's swallowing it, that looks like a food that you can't do it. And if Rabba holds on to this rule of hoil, name a hoil v'kodem tibul shari. Why don't you say that since before dipping is mutter, or before you have your meal, right? Tibul is like your meal, or right when you dip, right? Since before your meal is mutter, so say after your meal is mutter. Use this concept of hoil. So our answer is no. Hadar be Rav mihahi. Rav was chayzer from that. He was chayzer from that, and he says, you're right, right? We do say hoil, right? In other words, it's not just after his mutter, but even before, so that case, you would have to say, and therefore maybe he would give the same teretz as Abaye. So who says he was chayzer in that case, right? Where he originally differentiated between before and after the meal. Maybe he differentiates and says, Yom Kippur is also to go to the mikvah, and Shabbos is mutter, and we don't say hoyel there. So it says, no, we don't say it. Why? The tiny learner Bryce is beferish. Kol chayav tefillah is tovlin kedarkan. Any person is required to go ahead and the tefillah is tovlin kedarkan. He goes in the normal way. Bein b'tisha b'av, bein b'yom kippurim. Whether it's on Tisha B'av or Yom Kippur. So we see that Yom Kippur is vadai mutter, right? For a person who needs to go to the mikvah on Yom Kippurim, even though there's perhaps might be subject to a ban. Nevertheless, the person does go to the mikvah then, and therefore, in order to agree with that, Rava says that Yom Kippurim is completely mutter. Fine. Yeah. No. Then I was which was the one? I mean, right.
There's riots for that.
Yeah. I mean, none of them we really knocked down. Some of we asked on they were defended, but there were 4 reasons. Right. Well, I think we gave 4 reasons. Right. There was schita was one of them, where you might carry it, or he's masakin kli, or he's just delaying himself. The shavin.
Wow. The woman with the common clothing to go in.
That was the case of the nida. Yeah. Right. That was, but only with the clothing. Well, that's what it says. It was right. It was a woman nida going who didn't have any Torah clothes. So what was she gonna do? So go to the mikvah with your clothes on. Fine. All right, so 2 dots. Right, correct. So he said, you can go ahead and use a stone utensil to put the water in and have it sort of quote unquote kiss or touch, make contact with the other water, and then the water goes from tamei to tahor. That's hashaka. So what does it mean? They say you do hashaka, but you can't be title. You can't go ahead and basically take a tamei kli, right, with water, and it also needs to be tahor, and basically be to dip that on yantif. So mani masnisin, who is a mishnah like lo Rabbi lo Rabbanan? It's not Rabbi or Rabbanan. Did Tanya in the Bryce? It says there ain't made this a kli al gav meimam taharo. We cannot go ahead and be tovel a kli, right? There's a kli al gav meimam taharo. We can't go ahead and basically dip, right? Be tovel water in a kli on yantif, right? In order to be matayr the kli. The ein mashikin esamai bekli evan lataron divi Rebbe. And over here it says, and Rebbe says, you can't do hashaka with water, right? Which in a stone utensil, which is not like our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah says the Ferish, right? The Shavin, that they both agree, both agree that you can't do this, right? And over here, Rebbe says, you can't go ahead and do hashaka with the water, with the tummy water in a stone utensil. Rebbe, one could be toivel, right? Tame water and a tame kli to be matared. And this seems to be everything is good, and that would be the chamim. So mani, whose opinion is this Bryce or this Bryce or our Mishnah? Who is the goal like, right? Rebbe, if it's Rebbe, kasha hashaka, then it's a kasha hashaka because Rebbe over there in this Bryce forbid hashaka, and our Mishnah matters it. And Rabbanan, and if it's Rabbanan, kasha hadbala, right? Then the tefillah is a kasha because our Mishnah banned tefillah, right, with let's say a wooden utensil that was tamei, and this brisa seemed to be said it was okay. So iboy same a Rebbe, iboy same Rabbanan. You can say it's Rebbe Rabbanan. Iboy same a Rebbe. You can say it's Rebbe. Our Mishnah is going like Rebbe. So this brisa. So reisha the brisa b'yantif is sefer Shabbos. The reisha in the brisa when it says ein as a kli al gavi meimav, that was talking about yantif, which our Mishnah is. And that which it says you can't do hashaka, that was referring to Shabbos. And therefore, that would go ahead and agree with our Mishnah, right? The kula masnisin b'yantif. And our entire Mishnah is talking about yantif, where he says hashaka is mutter, but being taivel kalim is asr. Or viboy sema. Or you can say, right, it's the Rabbanan, the kula masnisin b'Shabbos, right? Or you can say it's the Rabbanan, and the entire the Mishnah, our Mishnah was talking about yantif, and this Mishnah, that Bryce over there was talking about yantif, right? Where the Chachamim said, right? Where the Chachamim said that you could do it, right? And he could it says Madina Sakli Al Gabi Mashika Samayim Bakli, right? So that over there says you could do it. It was only that was referring to yantif, and our Mishnah was referring to Shabbos. Fine. Taner Rabbanan, kli shenitma be'erev yantif, a kli that was tamei on erev yantif, ein matbilon also bein hashmashos. One cannot be tovelet bein hashmashos. Now, normally, right, there's a halacha, right, in addition to being tovelet, that you got to do it, you have to wait for nightfall. Issue is, if it was already nightfall, then you got to wait another 24 hours. Okay, so Banish Mashus is suffix, right? Banish Mashus is suffix, right? So if you don't make it, if you do it Banish Mashus, then L'chara, right? You have to be L'chumra and wait, another. So Ein Matina, so Banish Mashus. If it came on before Yantif, Mayor of Yantif, and all of a sudden he's running to the mikvah to get there before Yantif, Banish Mashus, you can't do that. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Amir. Af b'chol ein matilin oiso mipnei shesarech erev Shabbos. Not only Erev Yantif, not only Tuesday, whatever Erev Yantif, even a regular Tuesday night, you can't be toivel at that point, right? Because the person, we'll soon see, might not know that you have to wait another full 24 hours.
Wait, with regard to Kalim require a hour of shemesh in order to become fully tahor?
Yeah. Hard tefillas kelim was different, right? Because we're not dealing with tuma. We're dealing with the fact that it was produced, not by Jews, right? That's the reason for our kelim, but it's not the same halachas as hair of shemesh.
He's saying,
This is where.
This is not Tame,
One
this is just-
store became Tame.
Right.
And just like a person.
It needs hair of shemesh.
Was or
Right.
became Tame.
Right.
He has to wait for our.
Exactly.
So the Caleb.
Right.
but why, he's saying even like on a weekday, you can't do it and then wait for the next night to use it?
Right. Because also that people aren't going to know.
Okay.
Right. So therefore, in order to avoid it, your cutoff is before ben ishmashus. So first of all, the question of Tanakama loy bo hair of shemesh. So why is the Tanakama allow a weekday? Right. He doesn't require of shemesh, right? So Rava, Tashkin Rabbanan the Beirav, the Asif Kamri. So he found the Rabbanan of the Beirav that were sitting and learning, and he said, over here, they're arguing about, right? Basically being able to judge a person's machshava, right? His intentions from his actions. What do you mean? What's the case? A person has a clean his hand and he's running to the mikvah to go ahead and be toivot. So Mar Saver. So the first opinion who held, right? The reason why, the one who says that on Chol it's okay, because he knows that on Yontif, he knows that he needs hair of shemesh. Otherwise, why is he running the mikvah? Why is he trying to get there before ben ishmashos? He obviously knows that he has to get there before ben ishmashos, right? And if he gets it, he looks at his clock, then he realizes that, I got to wait another 24 hours. So we're not worried about him, right? And we're not worried about him in that case. Well, Mar Saver, and they went held that no, Machmas Malachta Hudakar. Maybe he has to go back to work. He's a busy guy. He has to do a carpool, right? He has to do his kid's carpool, right? So that's why he's running. He's not running because he knows the halacha. So maybe he doesn't know the halacha. So therefore, we say can't do it. A person should not do it at that time. And I say, even in such a case, no one argues. Everyone sees that the person knows the halacha. Right? He knows the halacha. Right, he knows that the reason why he's running is because he needs to get it before sunset. Right, so kipligi kigoin the itme b'pachas mekadasha. We're talking about a case of a person comes in contact. Right, he touches something which is less than a dasha, less than the size of a lentil. The bone is a very small bone, and therefore it is not really contaminated on the raisa level. Right, the asik the coming to Rabban, the shuling comes from the Rabban's asked b'pachas mekadasha itme lo. So is one less than a dasha is yitamei lo? So Mar Saver midahaloi gomer harav shemesh naim lo gomer. The fact he doesn't know this halacha that has to be the size of a lentil, and therefore he's not tamei, or it's not the utensil is not tamei. So he also probably doesn't know the halacha of harav shemesh. So therefore we're going to assume this guy is unlearned, and therefore we don't want to go to the mikvah at all, right? So you can't go ahead and be toivel right after shkia into ben ishmashus. Mar Saver no hahu delay gomer. Maybe he used that case. He didn't know halacha. However, harav shemesh gomer, but maybe he does know the halacha of harav shemesh. Fine. Umadilim negav lagav. Then you can go ahead and be toivel from one purpose to another. What's going on here? So Tanabanan ketzam negav lagav haroitz alasa is gito agav kado. Right. And one wants to go ahead and that he wants to be toivel right for the purpose of his wine press. And then by using basically in the end, he wants to use basically a pitcher. He wants to use basically for another person or a vikado, or he wants to go ahead and use this pitcher al-gav gito, right, of something that was toivel for his wine press. In other words, he had one intention to use, right, and then decided he wanted to use for for a different purpose, right? He can do it. In other words, you don't have to be toivel for the shame that new usage, right? Since it was already toivel, right? Therefore, it would be okay. So, in other words, that if he was toivel for one purpose, right, and then he wants to use it in a different way, he can go ahead and use it. He can do it in that way, right? So that was the Mishnah said. Let me just get the Mishnah again. Right? We said matilim negav gav, right? Oh, I did it right.
One, and then he wanted to also make a car for
right.
God.
So he can do that on Yantif, right? In other words, really he doesn't need it, and therefore, since he doesn't need it, he's allowed to do that on Yantif. That's so. No, he's out to be gav lagav. That because it's really mikra din, not necessarily needed, but he wanted to do it anyways. And Ketzai v'chabura chabura. What does it mean that he can also do it? We said it says matbil megav lagav ula chabura chabura. Does that mean chabura chabura? Haya aicha b'chabura zu. The rights of b'chabura acheres. If he was supposed to be part of one chabura when it comes to eating the Karban Pesach, and decide, you know what, I'm gonna go to these guys. Guys, a little cooler than you guys, right? What's the chabura acheres? Harshus biyado. He's allowed to go ahead and do it. In other words, since really mikra din, he's not being masakin himself, right? Nevertheless, he's allowed to go to the mikvah again because he already was basically tahor when it comes to the Karban Pesach. So he can go ahead and do it again. It's not a real tefillah, right? Fine. Which is probably also the reason, when people now they go and eat Yontif for Shabbos. Fine. Mishnah says, Beishamai oimrim mevin shlomim. So Beis Shammai says one can go ahead and bring a shlamim on Yontif, right? You bring a shlamim on Yontif. By shlamim there is a chilas adam, right? It's not just all goes to the bed. There's a chilas adam. Person goes ahead, oichel nefesh, right? They can prepare the meat on Yontif, so you can bring mevin shlamim.
There is a chiyuv to bring a
yes,
shlamim.
right. So there is the shlamim chagiga and there's olas riyah. Those are the two obligatory karbanos, right? One is an olah, right? The other one is a shlamim, right? So it says mevin shlamim. The ain't samich aleim. However, you can't do smich on it. You can't lean on the animal, right? Because normally you can't use an animal on Yontif. It's exera. So we don't do smich on Yontif, right? There's other parts of Yontif. Now remember, there's other parts of Yontif because it's Chol also, and some of the holidays have Chol, right? So over here, we're saying you can't do smicha on Yontif. Aval lo olos, but you don't bring olos on Yontif because there is no oichel nefesh. Beis Hillel says no. You bring your the shlamim, right? You can bring those. You can bring olos, even though there is no oichel nefesh, right? No one's benefiting from it. All the meat and stuff is, you're cutting and then this, right? None of that's all going on the mizbeach, right? And you do smich also. You can lean on the animal. We're not geyser in that case. You can do smich on the animal. Fine. That was.
Is this Mishnah coming to talk about other than the?
We'll soon see about Nadar and Nadavos. We'll get to it. No. These are the Mishnah doesn't say. The Mishnah doesn't say. Obviously, the Gemara is going to talk about what was the Mishnah talking about. Right. So we'll soon see. We'll soon see what the Mishnah is talking about. There's a machlokes, obviously, right? It's machlokes because the Mishnah doesn't say beferish. Are we talking about Darwin and Davos? Are we talking about the chiyuvim? Are we talking about the olas riyah? Are we talking about regular? So let's see what's going on here. Amar ula machlokes b'shalmei chagiga. Right. Lismok. Right. The machlokes b'shalmei chagiga lismok v'olas riyah likarev. Right. It's by the machlokes in our Mishnah says ula. That's going to be our first opinion. Is regarding, right, the smicha of the shlamei chagiga. In other words, everyone agrees you can offer it, even Beis Shammai, right? But you just can't do smicha. And bringing an olas riyah, right? The Beis Shammai savri, the Beis Shammai holds the chagosem oiso chag Hashem. Chagiga in olas riyah lo. It says the chagosem oiso chag Hashem. The chagiga yes, but not the olas riyah. Beis Hillel savri la Hashem, kod la Hashem. Anything that's for Hashem, olas riyah, chagiga, it's all good. But when it comes to Nadar and Nadavos, stuff that are not shayach to the holiday, a person just says, I'm going to bring in a Dava, and I'm going to be in Yerushalayim for Sukkot, I'll just bring it then, right? Nadar and Nadavos, you can't go after that in Yantif. V'chein Amar Rav Ada Bar Papa, so to Rav Ada Bar Papa, V'chein Amar Rav Ada Bar Ava, right? Nadar and Nadavos ain't clean b'Yantif. You can't go ahead and offer those in Yantif. Fine. Meisvei asked a kasha on Ula's interpretation. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar loy nechlu beishav Beis Hillel al ola sheina shel yantif sheina kreva b'yantif. They don't argue about an ola, right? That's not for yantif. That it's not offered in yantif. V'yal shlamim shein shel yantif, or the shlamim that is the yantif. Let's say the shlamim chagiga shekrim b'yantif. Everyone agrees that they offer in yantif. Alman nechlik. What do they argue? An ola she shel yantif, an ola of yantif, like the ola sriya. Yeah, shlamim sheina shel yantif, or a shlamim that's not yantif. It's not yantif. It's not associated with yantif at all. but there is Eichel Nefesh.
So, but they
So
also argue on Shlamim that you say you do smicha and Shammai say you don't do smicha. So it's not just the whole. It's also the smicha.
Okay, regarding the Hakrav, true, yeah, very good, right? The Ashlam Sheina Shel Yantif. So, or Shlamim that's not associated with Yantif, but there is Eichel Nefesh. One could benefit from the basar and Yantif. Beis Shammai, I mean, lo yavi. The Beis Shammai says in these two cases, the Ola that's a chiyuv, and the Shlamim that's not a chiyuv. The Beis Shammai says lo yavi. Beis Hillel, I mean yavi, and Beis Hillel says you can bring it. So this is a kasha, right? And Ula, who said even a Nadar and Nadava that was a Shlamim, you can't bring a Yantif. And over here it says no, you can bring Shlamim that are Yantif. So Teretz Ebahach, he said like this: Amar Bishum ben Elazar lo nechlu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al Ola u'Shlamim shein Yantif, right? They don't argue on Ola and Shlam Shein Yantif, Shein Kivim V'Yantif. They those aren't part of the Shlam Shein Shel Yantif, Shekrim V'Yantif, or even a Shlamim, right? That's of Yantif that can be offered in Yantif. Alman Nechel. So what do they argue? Al Ola Shishel Yantif, right? They only argue on Ola Shishel Yantif. So in other words, take out the Shlamim Shein Shel Yantif out of the Machlokes. That's there's still an agreement that you don't bring that, right? What do they argue about? On the Ola, that's on Yantif. Beis Shammai, I mean Lo Yavi. Beis Shammai says you shouldn't bring. Beis Hillel, Yavi, you should bring. And Rav Yosef Amar, so Tanai Shekalta Mialma, well, you're just removing, right? Tanaim from the world. Right? We just had a machlekes. That's the case. Now you're saying, just disregard that. Move the Shlomo Shein Yantif, and basically, change Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar's opinion. No, he says you do smicha. He says you do smicha.
It's not clear. He just says Ravim Shlamim Ba'olos.
No, v'samcha lehem.
He says clearly that he says.
Oh, something.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
It's early. It's still early. It's still before you.
I bet.
All right. So says Rabbi Yosef. Tonight it's machlokes tonight. The time of the Brayso Shlamim haboy machmas yantif b'yantif. A shlamim that comes because of yantif. Beis Shammai Ibrim Saimech Aleim Be'er of yantif. The shechtim b'yantif. That he says you do the smicha before yantif and you do the shchita on yantif. Beis Hillel Ibrim Saimech Aleim b'yantif. The sheikhtim b'yamtiv. Now you can go ahead and do a smich on them, and you can shech them, right? Aval nadar and davos they call ein krivim b'yamtiv. But then when it comes to nadar and davos, then those are not offered. Fine. So v'hai tonight, kihani tonight, right? And these tonight, like these tonight, it was same machlokes tonight. The time of the brayso. Because you're using an animal, and one is not allowed to go ahead and might come to use an animal for other reasons on Yantif, right? The Tanya we learn in the Brayso. So the Toda, right, comes with 40 loaves. There 10 of which I think are chametz. I think 30 are 30 are matzah. 10 of which are chametz. Right, I always forget which of them, but I think it's 10 of the chametz, and you can't. Therefore, you don't bring a Toda on the holiday of Passover. And not at and not on Shavuos because it's Yantif, right? Because basically there's no, we'll soon see, right? Maybe Adam told us about Chagasus. They can bring out on Sukkos. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, Harei hu Omer b'Chag HaMatzos b'Chag HaShavuos b'Chag HaSukkos. No, the pasuk says, because of Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, Kol Sheba b'Chag HaMatzos, b'Chag HaShavuos, b'Chag HaSukkos. Anything can be brought on Chag HaMatzos can be brought on the other holidays of Shavuos and Sukkos. Kol Sheba b'Chag HaMatzos, but something that cannot be brought on the Chag HaMatzos, Eino b'Chag HaShavuos, b'Chag HaSukkos. You can't go ahead and bring it on Shavuos or Sukkos.
So you couldn't bring either.
Right. Well, we're going to explain this Brayso, but yeah, that's what he said. You can't bring on Pesach, you can't bring on Sukkot or Shavuos either, right? We'll soon see why. All right, because remember, a Toda is not an obligation to bring on a certain day, right? You bring a Toda whenever you want, right? It's not an obligation to bring on Yantif, so therefore, don't bring on Yantif.
So you're supposed to bring it within 30 days.
We'll get to Baal Tachar. We'll get to very good. We'll get there.
Or if you're already slept.
Let's see. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omer, maybe Adam Todas b'Chag Sukkos v'Yaitze ba Yidei Chavasa Mishum Simcha ben Yaitze ba Mishum Chagiga. Says Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, you can bring your Toda on Sukkos, and not only that, you can fulfill your obligation of your Simcha, of your Shamei Simcha, right? That is because of that of your Shamei Chagiga, right? If it's for that, ben Yaitze Mishum Chagiga, but he does not. He doesn't get. But he can't fulfill his obligation of the chagiga, right? So he does have simcha, but he doesn't have chagiga. We'll soon see why. Right, simcha. Right, that constant Shabbat simcha that can be both, but it can't be both chagiga. Because remember, a chagiga one is already obligated in. You're obligated to bring a shalmei chagiga. You're not obligated to bring a shalmei simcha. You can bring shalmei simcha, but it's not an obligation. So therefore, this can fulfill something which is not an obligation. It can't fill something which is you're already obligated to do and count as two. Fine, we'll get there. So now we're going to sort of go back and explain this Bryce. So so this is pshita. It's obvious, right? There's chametz. You can eat chametz and pesach. So I'm Rav Berei Rav Yitzchak. Rabbi then some say Rav Shmuel Barabba. Hacha bi'arba'asar askinan. Except for Eimavin the kachim the pesach. So over here, not only on Pesach, even on Erev Pesach, right? Where in the 4th hour chametz becomes aser. So therefore, even in the morning it's mutter, but eventually the loaves are going to become chametz. So therefore, since it's going to end up with base psul, we don't allow you to bring it even in the morning. The loy about seres and shu yantiv, and also you can't bring on shus because yantiv ksav nedarim nedavos ain't karim yantiv because you can't offer nedarim nedavos on yantiv, right? So that which we were talking about earlier, right? And the chag matzos, the chag sukkos. Remember, those have days of cholamoid, which are still part of sukkos and pesach. So when it says sometimes you can bring it on sukkos, it means they're cholamoid sukkos, right? But shvus doesn't have cholamoid. Right, so therefore, this is the cholmud. So therefore, you can't. It was only yantif, and you can't bring nadar and nadavos on yantif, right? So because the toda is in a nadava, right? About maybe adam todasa b'chagasugas. But you bring it toda b'chagasugas. Samos. Elaine will be yantif atzma. What are we talking about to bring his toda? If we're talking about yantif itself, martiv loybet says we play yantif. You can't bring out says because yantif, right? So. Same reason should apply to sukkahs, right? Rather time a chalmai, right? So only then he can go ahead and bring his todah chalmai.
Pesach. That's why you can. But
Chalmai Pesach is also because of chametz. You can't bring a todah because part of the todah is loaves that are chametz, that are bread. And Rabbi Shimon Omer, Harehu Omer, he says b'chag matzos, b'chag shavuos, b'chag sukkos. It says all three. Now. Right? So but if it can't be brought on Pesach, then it can't be brought on Shavuos or Sukkos either. So Maskefla, Reb Zera, Sahashta, right? So he says Saloisi Mistalinan, right? Nidar Davos Miboy, right? So even for the purpose of gathering wood, right? Right. So Nadar and Davos boy, right? So if you're allowed to go ahead and bring wood, right, which is attached to the ground of Chalmai, right? You're allowed to be kaitzis eitzim. If a person said he's going to go ahead and have to bring wood, so you're allowed to go ahead and chop wood on Chalmai to bring it, right? There's a violation of Baal Ta'acher. Thou shall not delay bringing your karbanos. Now there's a machlokes when it mentions over there the pasuk. But it says right. It says over there. Kisinor nedel Hashem lekechel lois acher l'shalma b'chag matzos b'chag sukkos b'chag matzos b'chag shavuos b'chag sukkos. Right. So it mentions those 3 holidays in order. So the machlokes as to how does Baal Ta'acher apply? You shall not delay your korban. If I say I'm going to get a korban, I can't bring it 7 years later. Right. So someone is say it's the first yontif. The reason why I mentioned all 3 yontifs is because whichever is the first yontif, that's when it applies. Others hold that no. Right? It has to be 3 in order. Another holds that it just has to be 3. Doesn't matter what's the order. So whether I did it between, Shavuos and Pesach, right? That would not be true. Right? Between Shavuos and Sukkos, right? I did sometime in the summer. So then do I have 3 Shlosh Regalim then? Or is it an order always starting with Pesach, ending with Sukkos? So that's the question of this. Amar Abaye, Bi'akrava Kuli Amalei Pligi Deshari. When it comes, right, to offering it, that's mutter. Keep legal to make him a love about tacher. The machlokes is when does one violate Baal Ta'acher? Right. So now you can bring the toda right over here on cholmoid. Right. You can cut wood on cholmoid. Certainly you can bring the toda. Right. So what does it say? When does it violate Baal Ta'acher? So Tanakama Savar Shlosh Regalim Amar Rachmana Afilu Kasidra. The Tanakama held right that it's any 3 regalim. Doesn't matter what point in the year you did it. You have to the end of the 3rd regel. Right, so if he did it right after holiday, right, that's when he made an eder. He's going to have a full year. If he does it right before one of them, he could, potentially have only, 7 months or so. Right, if he does it right before Pesach, right, or right before right? If he does it before Pesach, then he only has, till the end of Sukkot, right? So in that case, he's chayv shelo kasidron, right? So therefore, he can go ahead and bring it during Sukkot, right? He brings Sukkot in order so he doesn't violate Baal Tacher. Rabbi Shimon Saver, kasidron in, kashaloi kasidron lo. Right? He says when he goes ahead and he brings it only if it's an order, right? But if it's not an order, not. Therefore, he doesn't have to go ahead and bring it on Sukkot. He can bring it afterwards because you have to wait till there's Sukkot, which follows, right, Shavuos and Pesach. It has to be in the complete order. So he didn't do it. He didn't make his neder before Pesach. Let's say he did it after Shavuos, right? So we'll actually have this year's Sukkot and all the way, right, year and a half, and all the way next year, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, until he violates it. Therefore, we say, you know what? You don't need to bring an al chalmaid because you have plenty of time. And Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Aimer,
Even with regard to the Toda.
right? You shouldn't, according to that opinion in the Brisa, don't bring it now because you don't have to bring it right now because you're not going to be violating Baal Tacher.
Over on Baal Tacher until the third.
According to that opinion, in order.
In order.
And we'll see this opinion.
But if it's all about Baal Tacher, why does it say you don't bring it on Pesach, you don't bring it on Sukkot?
No. So that was for those. So for that one, so when it comes to this case, that the Nadarim Davos is only talking about the Baal Tacher aspect, right? But the Hakrava, right? They weren't arguing. They weren't arguing about Hakrava. You can do it. It says, when is he violating Baal Tacher? So he says, maybe Adam Toras B'Chagas Sukkos, he can bring Amos when Elaim B'Chol Shamoid Haina Tanakama. If it's just saying that you can go ahead and bring a Chalmoid, it's Tanakama. Ella B'Yontif. Rather, he's talking about Yontif. So Nadarim Davos, Krivim B'Yontif, and he holds that they can be offered in Yontif, and therefore. Right? So therefore he can go ahead and bring the Darnay Davas and Yantif. So why did he say he can bring us Sukkos? So there's Reb Shimon Tami, the Tanya. He holds Reb Shimon Omer, Lo Yomer Chagas Sukkos, Sheba Kasam Adaber. So he didn't need to mention Chagas Sukkos again because the pasuk wasn't talking about that. So Lama Namar was telling you, Lamash Zeh Acharon, to tell you that that's the last of the holidays, and that's when one is Chayiv. And Rabbi Ezra Reb Shimon Omer, Lo Yomer Shezeh Goring. Sukkot is always the cause. In other words, it doesn't matter if Sukkot was the first holiday after his nether or if it was the third. It's always the cause. Therefore, if you don't go ahead and offer it now, you violated Baal Tacher. So even if you made the nether, right, today, right, 2 days before Sukkot, I'm going to violate if I don't bring my korban by the end of Sukkot. If I make it my nether in 3 weeks, I have an entire year. It only matters when Sukkot is, according to that opinion. So that's why he holds on Sukkot, you can go ahead and bring it because otherwise you violate Baal Tacher. And then we said the Yaitzeh Mishum Simcha. We said one violates because of Simcha. Excuse me, he fulfills obligation of Simcha. So why is this? Because it's Pshita. Sadar Shevachovu, right? The Chagiga is never Chova. The Chodor Shevachova ain't ba el min achula. You can only bring something which is unsanctified, right, or unconsecrated to fulfill your obligation. If something is already consecrated because it's my toda or something else, I can't also bring it as my chagiga. So as a no late tzricha diafagav de parish, even though that he made that in the beginning, he says this is going to be my toda chagiga. That still doesn't work. And can the boy Rabbi Shimon and then Lakish be Rabbi Yechon, like Rabbi Shimon asked Rabbi Yechon, however, harei toda chagiga. If one says, I want to go ahead and bring a toda, and it's also going to be my chagiga, or if one says, I already nazir, I'm going to go ahead and be a nazir. And then when I go ahead and cut my hair, right, and I bring my karbanos, I'm going to bring it for my meister sheni money. So mahu was there. So Rabbi Yechon says, nader ve'ena yaitse. It's a good nader. It is a toda, but you can't go ahead and bring it as your chagiga. And nazir, you are a nazir. However, ve'ena meglech, but you can't go ahead and and bring your karbanos from the months of meister sheni. That part of your statement doesn't work. Oh, the first part was so you can't fulfill an obligation from something that was already consecrated. All right, we'll stop here at the slides. Shkoyach, everybody. So tomorrow, it's regular time tomorrow, following the 6:25 shachars.